It's Labor Day here in the country, and in the Commonwealth of Virginia, it's election time. That's right, 2024 is the presidential election, but also we've got an important election here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's State of the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville, and joining us to talk about and kick off our election show is none other than our U.S. Congressman, Bobby Scott. We'll be right back in just a moment. Welcome back. It's State of the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. Again, happy Labor Day to everyone out there. We hope that you're enjoying your Labor Day weekend, which marks the last days of summer, right? And some say the last day to wear white. But listen, if it looks good on you, wear it anytime you want. You know, for those of you that join us every Sunday, we want to thank you for your support. We also thank the greatest alumni in the world, that's the Spartan Nation, as we broadcast every Sunday from none other than the campus of the Norfolk State University, home of the Spartan Nation, from none other than WNSB Hot 91, the soul of VA. Well, listen, it is 2024, and we are kicking off our election show series all the way up to the election in November. And we're starting it on this Sunday, September 1st, with none other than who I call the smartest congressman on the Hill. And he just happens to be our U.S. Congressman representing here, Norfolk State University. Not only that, but also Newport News and part of the peninsula and down in Norfolk. But none other than U.S. Congressman Bobby Scott. Congressman, how you do this morning?
I'm doing fine. Thank you, Eric, and thank you for all that you do at Norfolk State.
Absolutely. Well, look, thank you for your support and all that you give us, because if there's one thing about you, you are what we call everywhere at all times, right? We don't know how you do it, but when we have an event, you're here. You're also in a community event. You're also on the Hill reading the bills, passing the laws, and making sure that NSU and your district and the Commonwealth is taken care of. So we appreciate you, sir.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I know you're a busy man, and we thank you for joining us on this Sunday as we kick off our election series. And we want to talk about the importance of 2024. Now, we're going to have candidates on the show. We're going to have individuals who are surrogates talking about this election. But we thought it'd be appropriate to have none other than the man that actually cast the ceremonial votes for the candidate for the Democratic Party, our Vice President Harris, and, of course, the Vice President nominee for this ticket, Governor Tim Walz. So, 2024, why is this important? Why should our listeners go out and vote?
Well, 2024, I think the important thing is to notice what the difference would be based on who gets elected. We've seen what has happened in this past administration: record number of jobs, lower health care costs, lower drug costs, transportation bill. After 4 years of a running joke, Transportation Week, we have a transportation bill. Earlier this week, I delivered over $1 million to Norfolk for a transportation project. And before that, a jobs program in the city of Newport News. But because we've created a record number of jobs, we need job training to fill those jobs. But we've done a lot. We've protected rights, voting rights, labor rights, LGBTQ rights, voting rights, worker rights. I mean, all kinds of rights, in stark contrast to the Project 2025 vision, where in terms of education, in the American Rescue Plan Act in the Biden-Harris administration, the biggest investment in K-12 education in the history of the United States, delivered according to the Title I formula, where poverty is the biggest factor, so the areas that needed it the most got the most. Project 2025 has a vision for education: abolish the Department of Education, abolish federal funding for low-income areas, scale back school lunches. This is abolish the student loan forgiveness programs, like the public service loan forgiveness program and things like that. I mean, just a totally different vision for education. In crime prevention, Project 2025 wants to get rid of consent decrees, and those are agreements when the Department of Justice comes in and finds discrimination in the criminal justice system and works with the city, and they agree to to corrective actions, they will usually submit that agreement to the court. And the court will then order that the agreement be fulfilled. That's the consent decree.
That's right.
What they want to do is get rid of consent decrees. I mean, these are agreements. These are, I mean, of course, it's they were coerced to do it because they've been caught discriminating. If they didn't, the court probably would have ordered worse. But they want to get rid of the consent decrees. I mean, there so much difference in terms of jobs. Biden and Harris created the most jobs in 4 years than any presidential 4-year term. In fact, by the end of the 4 years, they would have created more jobs in 4 years than any Republican created in 8. Only Bill Clinton would have created more jobs in 8 years than Biden and Harris have done in 4. But they, compared to Trump, worst job performance in almost 100 years. I mean, and then they brag about the good economy. They think people are going to forget the long lines to the food banks, and you couldn't buy toilet paper.
That's right.
What kind of economy is that? They keep calling it a good economy under Trump, and say the record number of jobs under Biden is a bad thing. They keep saying it. People will begin to believe it. Well, you can't change the numbers. The difference in the Supreme Court, the president will appoint Supreme Court justices. If Trump is elected, he'll appoint judges like he's appointed before. Judges, dozens of judges, that wouldn't say whether Brown v. Board of Education was properly decided.
Wow. You know, when you talk about what's on the ballot, you know, a lot of people say, well, I don't know really what's on the ballot. But as you just described, there's a lot on the ballot this 2024. As a matter of fact, you know, we talked about, I mentioned earlier, you know, you were the one to cast the vote or be the spokesperson for the votes being cast for delegates at the DNC. And part of that experience is just historical, you know, for you know, being, of course, the first African-American and South Asian woman being nominated. And, of course, yourself, you know, being African-American and South Asian as well. And then not only that, but then also the fact that when you talk about what's on the ballot, they talk about freedom, the United States on the ballot. Is it imperative that we pay attention to what's being said and what's not being said by the other side? You mentioned Project 2025.
Well, it's interesting that Trump is trying to move away from it. I don't think they expected people to actually read it. It's 900 pages, but people have read enough of it to know how bad it is in terms of the environment. He wants to get rid of all environmental regulations. When the Inflation Reduction Act had the biggest investment in fighting climate change than any legislation in the history of the United States. I mean, there's just two different visions, and they just think we weren't gonna read it. In terms of tax policy, they want tax cuts for the rich. We want the child tax credit, which was credited for reducing child poverty almost 50% when it was in effect. These people talk about inflation, and we got to understand, and you got to be very take a good close look at the Republicans when they talk. There is a difference between complaining and blaming and actually solving a problem. The Democrats look at a problem as something to solve, make life better for people. Republicans look at a problem as something to weaponize, complain about, get people mad about, blame the Democrats for, and try to pick up votes. They don't have the one thing that's conspicuously absent in all of their complaining and blaming is a solution. The worst example of that is they've been complaining about the problems at the border. Okay, the problems at the border. A bipartisan, mostly Republican proposal led by Senator conservative Republican Langford from Oklahoma, was proposed, a comprehensive bill. Democrats didn't particularly like it, but if that's what we got to do, let's do it. We're all set to vote for it, and Trump said, "Oh no, don't solve the problem. If you solve the problem, then we won't be able to complain about it." They killed the bill. Okay, then you know next thing they did?
What's that?
Complain about the problem at the border. I mean, no. You cannot kill the bill and then continue to complain. And they do it about everything. They just complain and blame, no solution at all. And so you've got to be when they talk about inflation. When inflation was going on, and Republicans wouldn't block everything we're trying to do in the House. We had the child tax credit, we had the stimulus checks, we had the enhanced unemployment benefits, enhanced SNAP benefits, and by the end of the year, as I indicated, child poverty went down 50%. Credit card delinquencies lowest in 30 years because we dealt with inflation, global inflation all over the world. You're not going to have an oasis of no inflation in the United States. We dealt with it and did something about it, and people were able to pay their bills. Then they killed the enhanced unemployment benefits. They killed the child tax credit, and so people are back to struggling again. But we actually are trying to do something about it. And for inflation, she's going to go after corporate price gouging. We're going to try to reinstate the child tax credit so that people have $300 per month per child, more money in their pockets to deal with the inflated prices. And inflation isn't as bad in the United States as it is everywhere else, but it's bad. And we're dealing with it. What are the Republicans going to do? They're going to complain about it. They're going to blame the Democrats, and they're going to pass some tariffs that will what? Increase prices. Are you kidding me? That's their solution to inflation? But you got to be careful. Listen to them. They have no solutions. All they want to do is blame the Democrats, get you all mad, get your vote, and then when they get in power, give tax cuts to the rich.
But that's definitely not the Democratic agenda. As a matter of fact, when you talk about what the Republicans are doing, if you look at the Democrat side, many people look at what Joe Biden and Vice President Harris did while their time in office. We came out of a major pandemic. We got our economy. People said it was going to tank, but it actually didn't. Things got a lot better financially for a lot of people. Of course, you mentioned inflation, but still, it's coming down. Gas is down. And for the most part, people are doing fairly well, if not better, moving forward. Should our country consider continuing moving in the Joe Biden-Harris agenda? In other words, should this be the second term where she continues the work of the Biden campaign? I mean, of the Biden administration.
The question is whether you want an administration that creates record number of jobs. Like I said, by the end of this, in a couple of months, we would have created more jobs in 4 years than any Republican president has done in 8. As opposed to Trump's economic plan created the worst job performance in about 100 years. Now they say, well, he had a pandemic. Well, so did Biden. Mm-hmm. Trump had about 10 months. Biden had 2 years of a pandemic, but he was able to manage it and create jobs during the pandemic. Trump was unable to do anything other than put up the worst job numbers in almost 100 years. So which do you want, somebody that can create jobs or not? And the jobs keep coming. I mean, the Fed has been trying to increase interest rates to kill the economy and hadn't been able to do it. I mean, they've raised interest rates, keep raising interest rates, but the jobs keep coming. And they're going to keep coming because the transportation bill hadn't totally been phased in. We have road. The 3rd District of Virginia has gotten money for roads, bridges, tunnels, airports, ports, broadband, and removing lead pipes. All of that's in the infrastructure bill. And I delivered over $1 million earlier this week to the city of Norfolk from that transportation bill. So the jobs are going to keep coming. Our challenge is training people so that they have the skills to get those good jobs. But that's one direction. There is no plan from the Republican side. Their plan is to come up with names they can call somebody, revenge that they're going to attack somebody, or a complaint to make you mad about something that they're not going to do anything about.
Wow. Speaking of attack someone, what's now trending is a Netflix show with, of course, former Speaker Pelosi, leaving her daughter documenting and talking about that time in the Capitol. It seems like it's for some ancient history, but you were there. You remember that time on the Capitol J6. Can you envision something like that ever happening again?
Yes. If Trump does not win, there is, they say an attempted insurrection that is not properly punished turns into practice. And so...
and that we don't want.
He's still out there. The Supreme Court has immunized some of the activities on January 6th. So I don't know if he gets elected, he will immunize himself and drop the charges. But there's every indication, and they're setting the stage. They're talking about election fraud when there's no evidence. The only election fraud in Virginia that I'm aware of, when somebody tried to vote twice, the most recent example was the governor's son.
Yeah, you're right. So
he was alleged to have tried to vote twice illegally. But in most of the cases, when they catch somebody trying to vote, most of the cases are Republicans.
Yeah.
So the idea that there is something, some Democratic conspiracy going on is absolutely ridiculous. So we need to just make sure we get out and vote, make sure the margin, as we say, is too big to rig. Last time Biden won by at least 3 states. They would have had to have flipped 3 states to have changed the results of the election.
Wow.
They had a couple of opportunities, but nobody wanted to commit historic level fraud to flip the results of their state if it wasn't going to make any difference. And so they and he was trying. You got the tape in Georgia where he said he needed to find these votes. You've got others who said they were pressured in Arizona. In Michigan, one election official refused to certify the Detroit votes in Michigan. That obviously changes the statewide results. He changed his mind, certified it, and went up to the state capitol. Then the next day, he changed his mind again. He said, no, I don't want to certify it. They said, it's too late. You already did it.
Right.
But, suppose he hadn't changed his mind. They've changed the law in Georgia where people can play games with the certification. And they keep talking about voter fraud when there is no voter fraud, and it's so decentralized, it's hard to see how you could have a coordinated fraud anyway.
Things aren't what they seem. Look, I want to switch to the Commonwealth of Virginia because, as I mentioned earlier in the show, you're one of the U.S. congressmen, the longest tenure we have in the Commonwealth. That's pretty much everywhere, especially for your district. Like I said, if it's a community event or a big check presentation, you're there. When we talk about the election, it's not just the major election, the federal election we have for president, but we have also our federal election and local elections here. You're running for re-election, and also we've got top of the ballot, our U.S. Senator Tim Kaine is also running for re-election as well.
Well, and on that, it's so important that he be re-elected. It's incomprehensible to think that the Democrats can maintain the Senate without Tim Kaine being reelected. And if the Republicans control the Senate, Mitch McConnell has shown that he is just unrestrained in what he will do to the process to block a Democratic agenda. I mean, Justice Scalia passed early in the year, I think it was February, and he would refuse to have a hearing for his replacement because he called it an election year. He just lied. He just made it up. He just wasn't going to have a hearing. At the end of the next 4 years later in an election year, Justice Ginsburg passed, and they confirmed Amy Coney Barrett lickety split.
Yeah.
An election year, and the level of hypocrisy. He doesn't. They don't view hypocrisy as a criticism. I mean, they just do it. And if he were to get in charge, the amazing thing is he could get all of his Republican colleagues to go along with it. That was the embarrassing thing. Not that he wouldn't try, but that he could get every Republican to go along with an historic blocking of a nomination, which means if you have a Democratic president, don't have a Democratic Senate, it's hard to imagine how anybody can get confirmed because the reason they eliminated the filibuster on appointments was because the Democrats were in control but didn't have 60 votes, and the Republicans wouldn't vote for anybody. I mean, nobody was being confirmed. You couldn't operate the government. So just in order to get people put in place, you'd have somebody appointed a deputy secretary or something, and 4 months later, they haven't had a hearing.
Wow. When you talk about the control of the Senate, it brings us back to checks and balances. The office of the president is very important, but it's only one branch of our government. We've got the executive branch, judicial, but the legislative branch, in order for that to act as a backstop, which is the creation of laws, the arm that creates our laws, you got to have balance. And when you mention the Supreme Court, I had an opportunity to be in the room when Ketanji Brown Jackson was doing her hearing for confirmation. And to see that be able to take place and know what could not take place, right, is kind of scary. Well,
Republicans, interestingly enough, I've thought back, it's been a very long time since a Democratic president has been able to get a Supreme Court justice confirmed by a Republican Senate. Now, Democrats will nominate Republicans will nominate someone with a Democratic Senate and get a fair hearing. But if you just go back, Biden's appointment of Ketanji Brown Jackson was with a Democratic majority.
Yeah.
Both of Obama's were in the first 2 years, so he had a Democratic majority in the Senate. Clinton's were in the first 2 years, so he had a Democratic Senate.
Yep.
Carter didn't get any. So you got to go back to Lyndon Johnson, and I'm not sure if he appointed anybody that was confirmed by a Republican Senate. So, I mean, you got to go back at least 50 years to find a Democratic president appointing a Supreme Court justice confirmed by a Republican Senate. So them failing to confirm somebody was not unusual.
Right. But it was business as usual, unfortunately.
And so if Tim Kaine isn't elected, you're just asking for mischief. The other thing on the ballot, obviously, is your local elections. You've got mayors running in several cities, and you've got obviously city councils and school boards. And those elected officials, I mean, with all the book banning and all the foolishness going on and what can be taught and what can't be taught. If you allow the wrong people to get control of the school boards, all kinds of ridiculous things can happen.
Absolutely.
So we have to pay attention to the school board elections and the city council elections and their mayor's elections in several cities in Hampton Roads.
That's it. Well, Congressman, we thank you for giving us your time, and I know it's very valuable. But like I said, you're a huge supporter of NSU. But one thing I want to cover before we end is every Labor Day you have this phenomenal cookout. The food is great, but the content of the reason why you have it is more important, especially this year. Can you tell our audience what's going to take place tomorrow at your annual Labor Day cookout?
Well, I was elected to the House of Delegates in 1977, and we had a strong effort in the primary to get nominated and won an upset victory. I was running against 3 incumbents, and we had a lot of hard work and to really reward the volunteers and get everybody back together and make sure everybody was working for the general election. You don't want to win the primary and then lose the general election. We had a little cookout on Labor Day, and it just became a tradition. We did every Labor Day would have a little cookout for the volunteers, and it just grew over the years to the point where it is a major event, not only in Hampton Roads, but statewide. I had a good Democrat in Northern Virginia say that I'd ruined their cookout, Labor Day cookout, because all of the elected officials wanted to be in Newport News on Labor Day. She couldn't get anybody to come. And I know in Southwest they had a Labor Day acres for Democrats that they had every Labor Day, and they ended up moving it to Saturday before Labor Day so they could get people to show up. So it's become quite a thing, and one of the unique aspects to it is that it's free. To come and see statewide elected officials, members of the General Assembly, mayors, council members, school board members, to see we usually have at least 30 or 40 elected officials at the event. To see that many elected officials, you usually have to end up paying $1,000 or hundreds of dollars to attend a fundraiser. You can see all of those elected officials without paying a fee, and that's maybe we ought to be raising some money during it, but we just like to we don't turn down contributions, but we like the idea that people can just come and enjoy a nice afternoon, eat a little food, but basically fellowship with elected officials in a very relaxed atmosphere. And it's worked out well over the years, and we look forward to a good event tomorrow.
Absolutely. Well, look, a little sneak preview. Any special guests?
Well, there's speculation, but it hadn't been confirmed just yet. But we always have the fact that we have all the elected officials. I think that's the special part to it.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I look forward to being there. I've attended for the better part of a decade now. So always a great time. And look, I always say that you're the smartest congressman on the Hill. I don't say that because you're my congressman, but I also value that we're also friends. So I really appreciate your friendship, your mentorship, but also your support and your representation of our district here. Congressman Bobby Scott, everybody.
Well, thank you, Eric, and go Spartans.
Go Spartans. Well, once again, make sure you go out and vote. Make sure you go out and learn about the candidates. But whatever you do, register to vote, go out and vote, and make sure your vote counts. This has been Stay in the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric LaVille. Until next time, be good, be great, God bless, and we'll see you next week.
Hi, I'm Carrie Washington, and you're listening to State of the Water with award-winning host, Dr. Eric LaVille.